right, well, I think we're pretty close to 4. If you were in my session yesterday, I learned, and I wore a lapel today, so I don't have to hold the microphone like yesterday. Who was in here yesterday, by the way? Okay, mostly just because I want to win a bet with my husband. Yes, okay. He was like, no, it's going to be all new people. They won't know. It'll be people that have no idea what they're getting into. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. We're going to kind of, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, here we go. I'm Courtney Burns. If we haven't met, this is kind of the last part of what we worked on yesterday, and we're going to talk about kind of applying some skills to caring for families post-pandemic. I'm super sick of talking about the pandemic. I think everyone is probably super tired of it, but the reality is there's a lasting impact on our kids, on our families, and on who we are. So we're going to go ahead and see what we can do to get at some of that. I'm going to try not to repeat too much from yesterday, but it does all kind of build on itself. I'll introduce myself again. I am the Director of Counseling over at Faith Lutheran Las Vegas. We're a 612 school of about 2,200 kids, which creates like anxiety in my chest when I say that out loud. We are really uniquely blessed there. I hold a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in counseling. I have licensure as a school counselor, and I am in the process of licensure as a clinical professional counselor, which, as I said yesterday, just means I will have dual licensure as I head out to parking lot duty. So it's very, very, very glamorous. I am married to a lieutenant with our police department. I used to be a corrections officer in a juvenile facility. And then I think my most fun topic from yesterday is I also have kind of obviously diagnosed ADHD, legitimately. And so that's a fun thing that we work through. We're going to go ahead and use Pear Deck again today. If you were here yesterday, you probably had a little bit of frustration. So today I tried to be a little bit better about this. Here's the website to go to on your device. This will give you my slides, and so my good Lutherans hiding in the back don't have to squint. You can see the things on your device. There's some interaction that we're going to do. There's some questions and some polls, and then also it gives you a chance to look at more interesting things on your phone and not be obvious about it during this. My plan today is a little bit less formal than yesterday. No one wants to be the session that goes all the way up to dinner time. I'm here to make friends, and so we won't plan to run the whole entire time, but I do want to hang out. Yesterday when we closed, we had time for some questions, and we didn't have time to answer all of them, and it was in such a large group setting, and some of the questions that were submitted were really deeply personal, and I didn't want to necessarily read them out loud and address them. So if you are one of those people and there's something that you want to talk about, I will be here afterward, and we'll end early to give time for that. If there are some things that you want to work on in kind of a larger setting, we can do that as well. All right, if you are on joinpd.com, it should be asking you for a code. Here we go. F as in Frank, X as in X-ray, U as in unusual, Q, Z, Q. And that should get you in. I'll do that one more time. F as in Frank, X, U, Q, Z, Q. Q. Which one? Oh, F as in Frank, X as in X-ray, U as in unusual, Q as in quail. It took me a second on a Q word. Z as in zebra, Q as in quail. That get you on? Are we having success? It's not letting you get in. Are you in? Okay. All right. Did you get it? It's taking you to that? Okay. Can I touch it? Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's see. All right. If you are not in, find a neighbor that looks friendly and tech savvy. FX. It is F as in Frank, X as in X-ray, U as in unusual, Q as in quail, Z as in zebra, and Q as in quail. And you can tell it how you're feeling today with the happy faces, but you don't have to if you don't want to. There you go.
Thank you
You're
so
welcome
much.
so much. Okay. Yeah, the unfortunate part about using this is once I start the presentation to get the code, it doesn't let me alter the slides at all, so I'm not able to put the code up that way. So it's awkward. So I appreciate your patience with it, but it is kind of neat to be able to just have it on your device. So that brings us to our first quick poll here. When you think about the adults that you serve, and if you're working in a school, really just the adults for a second, parents, parishioners, et cetera, how are those relationships going? You have a couple of options there. Right. So as we're rolling in, it's not giving you up there the response, but we are very much in the lead with has everyone lost their minds? So I'm happy to know that's not just Vegas. Some of you are same as pre-pandemic, and whoever the two of you are that think that things are so much easier than they were pre-2020, I'd like to chat after this and find out what you're doing where you are. Because there is a lot going on, right? We all only have so much emotional reserve. When we're out of emotional reserve, we are more irritable, we're more reactive, we take things personally, we don't respond in the way that we normally do, and the world is kind of out of emotional reserve. And so here we are. So we're gonna talk about when we understand the whys, it's easier to know how to proceed. We all had a pandemic together, except we totally didn't, right? Because everyone's pandemic experience was so different, but we don't always stop to think about that. And it gives us this feeling of, I don't get to be upset, I don't get to be angry, I don't get to call this a trauma, I don't get to complain about it, because everybody went through it. And that's just, the playing field was not level, by the way, in any of this. My favorite meme of the whole thing was the one about the celebrities spelling out, we're all in this together with their yachts. I don't know if you saw that one. But you know, the experience was different, the takeaway was different, and then just kind of where we're going with it. And so in dealing with our adults, we're kind of finding the motive behind the reaction that we're getting is coming from one of really three places. Shame is so huge. I will tell you, after all of my work experience, and I've never seen anything like this as far as the substance abuse that has spiraled, and we know it. I mean, we see the statistics, right, that alcohol use is up, drug use is up. People that were in rehab are no longer in recovery. People are heading to recovery. The statistics are scary. I'm telling you, we are seeing it in real time. I have never had so many parents moving in and out of rehab and moving in and out of recovery centers while the kids are trying to keep it together. And I want to also acknowledge the fact that I'm in a pretty wealthy private school, right? Like my demographic is certainly not immune to struggles by any stretch. If they were, I would probably get to eat lunch every now and then. But they're not. I just always think if they have these resources available and they have these tools, and this is what I'm seeing, I can't imagine what it looks like with less resources and less tools. So we have that going on. You may have noticed this trend as well. All of our families who went into lockdown together and then realized that maybe this marriage wasn't quite what we thought it was, their divorces are all becoming final right now. And so we are seeing kids having to, for the first time, navigate split homes, navigate splitting resources, and having their worlds changed in that way. And so the world is truly upside down. And I'm seeing reaction in parents that is rooted in the shame of that. When a mom comes in and is very, very combative with me, and then we start to unravel what's actually happening, and she is one of my rehab moms, and she is back in the home, and she is well aware of what her daughter witnessed, and she does not want her daughter to have to suffer one more thing because she knows what she already put her through. That's really hard. I mean, I'm still not changing our math class, right? But it's really hard. It's okay, you guys, if we don't laugh at some of the stuff, we're all gonna quit, okay? So it's okay. Like, we have to find something light on it. But it is a difficult thing, and it's something that we have to kind of acknowledge because we are all operating from a shame place too, right? We did not keep our churches open perfectly. We did not keep our schools open in the best way possible. We made mistakes along the way. We had some relationship bumps along the way. And so now here we are with an angry parent or an upset child, and we're reacting from the knowledge of, I've already failed. Like, it's real fresh, all these things that I would do differently if I could. And so I don't have a great answer for that other than when we see shame for what it is, it loses a whole lot of its power. You know, we didn't fail, we're here. We learned a whole lot of things along the way, and we have to take some of that away. The other part of shame, though, is we have adults that are operating from guilt just about the experience. Like, it's totally out of their control, but I have so many parents that I continue to hear, you know, my kid lost this portion of their childhood. You know, they lost 2 years of getting to play Little League, or they lost the chance to be on stage, or they lost the chance to be on school, and they're just in such grief about it. And they feel so guilty that it happened even though they had no control. And there's this really desperate struggle to regain that childhood for them and to regain those opportunities for them. And I will tell you what, you cut one of those kids from a play or a sports team, like, prepare, right? Prepare for what's coming. But that's where it's coming from. And we have to say that out loud. Like, yes, your kid did miss this. That's so unfair. This whole thing is so unfair. And we're all in it together. We all missed things. We all didn't get things that we were hoping for in this. And at this point, what we can do is move forward. I have had this crazy number of parents who want their kids to repeat 8th grade. That want to come in from a different school and do 8th grade again. And it's this need to buy back a year of having a normal childhood. And so it's there, it exists. And then general derailment, right? The general train wreck, because we can only manage what we can manage. And so when we put families in the place of, we're gonna have to homeschool, we're gonna have to try to work from home, we're gonna have to figure out how to keep our businesses open, we're going to have to figure out how we feel about this virus and where our level lies on protecting ourselves and what we do with our families, we're gonna start losing details. And so we're gonna see these kids coming in who don't have the organizational executive functioning skills because there was no place to teach that along the way. And we're gonna have parents that missed some parenting milestones. You know, they didn't have some of the lower stakes disappointment that you kind of cut your teeth on as a parent, right? When your kid comes home for the first time from the playground and they weren't invited to go play something and they're kind of wounded, you get to walk them through it, and that's kind of the training wheels for what middle school is like. And they just had to kind of skip right to it. We derailed. We didn't have experiences in line. And so when we have the parents that show up and they are just like ready to fight, when we can take that second and diffuse it to figure out what is it? Because it's one of these three things. You feel bad about yourself, you feel bad about your situation, or you didn't have the chance to prepare for this that you should have. It's one of those. And so from there we can kind of get at that. Now, when you consider the interaction that weighs heaviest on you, because I kind of assume you're in here because maybe you're having some rub somewhere along the way. When you kind of think about the interaction that's weighing on you the heaviest, which of those motivators do you think you were dealing with? No, they're just crazy. Yeah, they could be. Yes. What do you think is driving the other person in this when you have somebody? Yeah, the other. Yeah. general, yeah, the general derailment is in the lead by far, you guys. I don't know why that's not. All right. So knowing where the parents are coming from, let's talk about the kids. This takes you to kind of a new one. The Dragables are my favorite because I get to sit up here and watch all the little things move around. But if you think about the interactions with the young people, your students, your youth group, your own kids, the kids that you're working with, how does that feel? Good. We've got a really solid cluster agreeing that the kids are just a little weirder now, which is good. I guess we're not totally out of control. It has been weird, though. You know, I used to feel like I could kind of gauge the response that I was about to get. And now I just kind of buckle up because I don't know where we're going to go with any of it. You know, we had a student suspended. It was a half-day suspension. It wasn't anything really major. Had made a comment to a friend that had some racial undertones to it that we weren't okay with, and so he went home to think about that, and came back and, you know, mediated it, was very apologetic, didn't quite understand what he was saying, he says, and we kind of prepared to move on. We prayed with him, he was good, he was ready to go, and his parents could not move past, everyone thinks my kid's a racist. And we're like, but they don't. Like there are 3 people in this room that know why he went home, and that's it. No one's talking about it. No one's called your kid this. He's okay. He's good. Him and his friend are good. We're all okay. And they very sincerely asked if we could have an assembly with 260 sixth graders where we could then turn to their son and acknowledge in front of the other 259 children that he is not racist, and that this would solve it, that then everybody would know. And we were like, but do you see what you're saying? Like, this is not a good scene for your child. And so we had to continue to unravel that too. One time I, may have had some things that I said in front of my son that I shouldn't have said, and that's where this came from. And I'm really afraid that you're judging me as a parent as raising a racist kid, and so I want you to publicly acknowledge that. I'm like, well, I will privately acknowledge that he is not a racist, and I think you're, okay, but yikes. Then there's a part of me that was kind of like, I don't know, maybe we should have the assembly and just see what happens. Maybe that's our new thing that we do. So, no. All right, so why are the kids so weird right now? Because they are. They really are, you guys. So normal social progression with kids tends to kind of go, in elementary school, you are friends with the kids who your parents are friends with their friends. That's just your life. Those are your sleepovers, that's your safety zone, those are the people that you know. 6th grade, 7th grade, you start to branch out a little bit, you're friends with the person that you sit by the most often, or maybe you have the most classes with, and you start to make your own friends. 8th grade, 9th grade, we start to see relationships that are formed more on common interests, common ethics, common behaviors, and then from there we start to move into more of trust and integrity and a little bit trying out those adult friendships. So what we did, and no matter where you're from, no matter how long you were locked down, no matter what life looked like for you, no matter how long your kid was in online school, if you have children, they went back to elementary friendships. because we let our kids hang out with other kids whose parents were doing the pandemic the same way we did. It's just how it is. If you were in a home with an immune-compromised family member, if you were fearful of this virus in a very fearful way, your kids weren't going anywhere, or if they did, they were only going to people who had the same beliefs. If you thought the whole thing was a hoax, your kid was traveling Europe with another family that felt the same way, right? So we circled our wagons, which I really, and this is a total side note, but if anybody wants to debate this with me later, I really believe this played into how we ended up just so polarized as a country, because we lost all contact with people that didn't believe exactly the way we believed about things. But anyway, with our kids, they didn't get to do the next stage of friendship. And so now we're seeing, when we were coming back to school this year, I was talking to our leadership team, and I just said, you guys, do you realize that our seniors have never had a normal year of high school before now? We were in masks last year till January. We were still kind of barking at them about going home for quarantine if they were coughing and things like that. So our seniors have never had a normal year of high school, and our 9th graders have never had a normal year of middle school. They didn't get one. Those kids are so weird, you guys. Like, they just are so disrupted. You know, we have 12th graders who haven't figured out how to navigate these kinds of friendships. We have 9th graders who have never made a friend on their own. Every friend they know is someone that they've either been intentionally placed in a group with, or their parents knew their friends. They don't know what to do with that. And so they are weird in like a really adorable way that needs a lot of help. But as we're working with the kids, though, we're making the assumption, but we're back, right? We're back in school. We're back face to face. There's 26 of you in front of me in desks. It's 2019. Get your stuff out. And they're just not the same kind of kids in the same kind of place. And we have to be different with how we approach things and how we mediate them, what we model for them, how we train them. I have to coach my kids. I think I have some pretty good social kids. We have to kind of work on, no, sometimes you have to be the one to ask people to do things. You can't just wait to be invited. And it's beyond them. And they're all doing that, though. I was talking to my son the other day, and I said, does it ever occur to you that there are 12 of you in this group chat who are very good friends, and you aren't going anywhere because no one knows how to be like, hey, should we go see a movie? Like, type it in right now. Experiment it for me. 20 minutes later, they're all at the theater. Like, they're all waiting for someone to figure out what they're supposed to be doing because they don't know how to do it. I should have gone with him to talk about it. He would have loved that. The other thing that happened with our kids, we lost our nonverbal cues. You know, they were home, they weren't having a chance to practice with each other, and then also, because we were in masks, in Nevada, we had a mask mandate. Again, it lifted in January last year, right, Pastor? And so our kids lost the chance to read facial cues and lost the chance to pick up on where we stand when we talk to people, right? They don't know how to do that. We didn't let them. They weren't able to practice that. And so now you have a kid who's going to run up to talk to you and doesn't know how to read your body language. They're weird. I spent a very long time at school trying to explain to kids, I'm not mad. Stop trying to read my forehead. It's all you can see. This is the only face I can make. It's all I've got. I'm trying to have kind eyes at you right now. I can't. And so let's take a middle schooler who already believes that they're weird, already believes that everybody's giving them dirty looks, already believes that people are thinking about them all the time and not including them and not inviting them in, and then let's not give them any facial expressions whatsoever. Yeah, it's bad, right? And so they don't know how to pick up on those things. We're doing social groups right now with 6th graders where we are seriously working on what do you think that person might be feeling off of that facial expression with 6th graders. I used to do that when I worked with pre-primary impaired kids. They haven't had the practice. That part of their brain hasn't had the opportunity to develop. I talked about a little bit yesterday. Brene Brown has a book out right now. It's her newest book. It's Atlas of the Heart. It's an HBO special too. It's so cool. She goes into every single emotion in the human experience, what it actually is, where it comes from, and kind of what you do with it. What's the difference between jealousy and envy? Don't ask me right now, I don't remember. Really breaking it down. I've been making my high school kids go through that. There's a big bulletin board out in our counseling hallway that lists all of these emotions that they all have to like stand there and stare at while they wait for me. Because we haven't had that time to develop that with them and give them a chance to recognize it in each other. And then there's the whole trauma thing. Trauma responses are hard. So yesterday we talked a little, when they were rewriting the DSM for the latest edition, I was so excited to take a look at it because there was finally some chatter about, let's really talk about the impact of trauma on people and how often the diagnosis of PTSD or oppositional defiant disorder or conduct disorder or even ADHD is really just a trauma response, how much that trauma can mimic that. And it didn't quite get legs. They expanded the PTSD diagnostic criteria and some of the things with it, but we didn't really get into it. And so, which was really unfortunate because there's a lot there. And when we have kids that don't have emotional reserve, don't know how to ask for what they need, think you're mad at them half the time, don't have a social network, and then they're put under any extra pressure, you're gonna get a trauma response. And it's gonna look like anger most of the time. When we don't know how we're feeling and we don't know how to say it, it comes out as mad. And so that's what we see with the kids. And for the longest time, our biggest complaint about this generation of kids that we're raising up is that they're the trophy generation, right? They're too soft. No one ever disappoints them. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody wins. Don't say anything mean. Don't look at him. It'll upset him. And then these kids had to, I'm so tired of the word pivot, but it's true. You know, they had to pivot and pivot and pivot and develop this resiliency in the fact that their world was so upside down. And last year, I gave a similar talk at this conference, and I remember saying, this is the silver lining. Here, I know, I take it back. I'm glad you laughed at that. Thank you. I need to stay humble. I remember saying, this is the silver lining. These kids, we don't get to say they're not resilient anymore. Look at what they've overcome, right? Because prior to that, we were sending kids off to college and they were coming home because they weren't quite sure how to function and how to solve problems. Or there's a story of an admissions counselor at WashU in St. Louis. WashU is one of the most selective universities in the country, right? It's top of the top. And this counselor kept getting this phone call from this student complaining about a professor who had unfairly graded her paper. And this should have been higher, and here's why, and arguing, and I need you to get involved, and I need you to step in. And after about the fourth or fifth conversation, the caller slipped up and said, my daughter. Right? She's a senior at one of the most selective universities in the country, and her mom is calling about her grade. And so that was what we were up against. And so I remember being here and saying, you know, this is good, you guys. They're going to be resilient now. They're going to know that they can overcome things and that the world can change and they're going to be okay and they can solve problems. But what has kind of happened in the time since then is they kind of stopped having the opportunity. And they weren't really solving problems. They were surviving. But it really looked a lot like we were creating some resilience in them. So I take it back. I was wrong. Pastor, you can go back to Vegas and tell everyone I said that. Okay, well, I better watch what I say. I might make some more false predictions here, so just be ready. That's a good one. So they're weirdly resilient in that they're able to survive and do some adapting, but they're also extra fragile. because they don't know what they're going to have to survive, and they're not very confident in their own personal skills to survive it. So let's talk about diffusing difficult situations with adults, also known as please don't yell at me in the parking lot. Why? You guys, is it true everywhere, like all bets are off in the parking lot? Like for real? I can't even. It is the worst. Like I had a day, I chased a car down one time. I was running over the speed bumps in my heels to knock on the window just to be like, I thought we were cool. Like you were in my office yesterday. I thought we were okay. Why did you just give me the finger? It's not my fault. None of this is my fault. And I would like to say that they were super embarrassed, but they weren't. They were mad at me about the traffic situation, which I don't control. But anyway, diffusing the situation with adults, if we can identify the emotion at the problem, if it's guilt, shame, if they're overwhelmed, if they're actually angry, we're gonna get really far. I will sit with a shame-driven parent all day long. It's okay. A parent who's just mad over a perceived injustice against their kid, that's gonna get a little bit less patience from me. And so we wanna really understand where they're coming from to make sure that we're giving legs to the correct thing. And that kind of, once a parent sees you, that you're understanding where that's coming from, they do tend to kind of de-escalate. My 18-year-old, I really have been throwing him under the bus a lot at this conference. He's a great kid, I promise. But when he was in 8th grade, he said the F word into a live mic at a packed house at the middle school play. Yeah, that was my kid. I got to go to work the next day and quietly die. And I can kind of laugh about it now. We called him F-word Evan for like years afterward. I think I'm gonna put it on his graduation cake. But that story now is one of like my best counseling tools. Because when I have the parent come in who is in that shame place, I get to kind of be like, by the way, my son once said the F word into a live mic at a packed house at a show of Charlotte's Web. And they're like, oh, you're okay, you're good. And then we can kind of go forward in understanding that we raise these kids and we do our best, but sometimes we have no control over the things that come out of their mouths. And then also that we just have to kind of let that parenting shame go sometimes, most of the time. And then we also have to work at getting at what the actual problem is. Rarely is the problem why they made the appointment. Rarely is the problem why the person in front of you is so upset. And so just to be curious and not be defensive as much as possible and ask the question and ask the question and ask the question. Affirm everything you can affirm. These are all the places where I think you're doing a great job. What we all desire is just to be seen, and what we really desire is for the good stuff to be seen, right? So whenever we can acknowledge that, you get a little bit of equity in that bank, in that relationship. And then my favorite one, I'm sure no one else ever hears this, but I thought this was a Christian school, right? Is that not the greatest response every time you have an upset person? Like, I thought this was a Christian church. I thought this was a Christian school. And it's so hard to not take the bait to go into that fight. But just, I forgive your child. That's Christian. I love your child. That is Christian. I'm going to hold your child accountable, which is also Christian. And there we go. Oops. And then helping the students navigate their new world, too. The internet got even weirder, obviously, as the more people were on it. And so the kids are finding that their world is more accessible than ever, but also less accessible than ever. There was an app that came out. It was a website, actually, Omegle. Have you heard about this one? Okay, let me tell you a horrible danger story then. You guys, this is a great takeaway. Omegle was born just a little bit before the pandemic, I believe, and it started with kind of okay intentions of I can get on here and type this really obscure thing that I'm interested in, and then the site will match me with someone else also interested in this really obscure thing, and now I have a friend that I can talk about this thing with and chat and things like that. And so when it first came out, I was like, well, that's kind of cool because my ADHD hyperfixates me on the weirdest stuff all the time. And so maybe on an Idle Tuesday, I could find someone who's also obsessing about if the Lemp Brewery in St. Louis was actually built on an Indian burial ground or not. Like, that's obscure because I lost 2 hours on Sunday to that. Turns out it is, just so nobody else has to research that. But it got really dark really fast, as these things do. And then we had kids who were on this site as their source of social interaction, kind of alone because mom and dad were working. And so I thought it had kind of died off, and then what's happened, this is a weird segue, but I feel like you should know this. It's now being used really for catfishing. I had a student this couple weeks ago that had been on the site, had been talking with someone that he thought was a young girl his age, because they always think that, and it was not. And so while engaging with this kid, this person pulled all of his information and then started to reply to him with, I know where you go to school, this is a picture of your little sister, these are your friends, this is your contact list, people are gonna start getting hurt if you don't do what I tell you to do, extorts some more information out of him, extorts him to make a video of himself. He is 11 and believes that his little sister is gonna die if he doesn't. So he does. And then they come back with, we're gonna send this to your school and to all of your friends unless you go get your mom's credit card. Really dark, you guys. And so that site is terrifying, but it also brings us back to the world is accessible but not accessible, right? He can find someone that he can talk to that'll share his interests, but it's not real. But that real person, that real connection is not accessible. And so that's where we have that responsibility to coach them up in how they navigate social situations and how they make friends and how they talk to people. Yeah, it was really hard. The good news is that, just to give you closure, the FBI became involved because apparently this is a big thing, and these people had actually screenshotted sending the video to other students of mine in direct message, and so the FBI had told this kid, once you stop engaging with them, they're not going to send this video. They have nothing to gain from it. Like, this is over. There's nothing to get from you anymore. They don't really want to ruin your life. They didn't actually send the videos. They made it look like they did and then sent it. And so, knock on wood, to date, nothing has surfaced, and we think it's over. But that's use that cautionary tale all over. Tell your kids. Yes, ma'am. It's Omegle. It's Omeagle. Children? Yes, right? Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was going away, but apparently not. It's really tempting as adults to come in and manage their social stuff, though, because of this. Like, we're just going to go back to, I'm going to set up your play date, and I'm going to do all the things for you, and you're going to have no unstructured time, and I'm going to make your world really small. And while that feels good, that's not going to help. We have to let them have these bumps, and we have to let them learn how to do these things. But I think that as parents and as pastors and as youth leaders and as just adults in this world, our coaching responsibility with these kids is greater than it has ever been. I spend so much time in my office working on perception versus reality, and on not assuming what the other person is thinking, because they just don't have a point of reference. And so, my friend hates me now. Okay, well, let's go minute by minute. What did she say? What did she look like? What happened? What's real? Like, what really happened? What did she actually say? Not what you think she meant, because they haven't had the time to practice that. They also no longer have an accurate threat perception, which I think that story illustrates. The world was either incredibly, horribly terrifying during the pandemic for them, or they were completely in a bubble. And so we're seeing that they do need that adult emotional barometer to help them kind of figure out what actually is happening. We're doing a lot of work right now with, are you unsafe or are you uncomfortable? Because that is not something that they've necessarily been taught to tell the difference. And so uncomfortable doesn't feel good. You get to not like it. That's totally fine. It is not the same thing as unsafe. And so learning how to tell the difference in that. And how's attendance going? Right? Are you having that struggle? The kids that are not in school, the people that are not where they're supposed to be? Yeah. So my kids that had social anxiety and then didn't have to have any social interaction can't come back right now. They are struggling so bad because all anxiety is telling you something terrible is about to happen. I'm just not going to tell you what. It's going to be a surprise. And when we give into it and we avoid the thing that makes us anxious, then anxiety trains our brain. Oh, well, you were right. Good job. Like bullet dodged. And so I have kids that cannot get themselves to come back to school because they are so afraid of the social situations, the worst is going to happen. We have kids that are avoiding all of these things, and for a long time they got to, right? And so coming back into it is hard, and it's also taking a lot of parent coaching in, drop them off crying. Every morning, I have like my little herd in the morning where I'm like, okay, just come in and be really upset for a bit, and then you're going to go to first block, because they will refuse to get out of the car, they will refuse to get out of the house, they will refuse to walk into the school, and so the deal we have is you're going to get dropped off and you're going to come in, and if you can convince me that you need to go home, then you can go home. But I'm not your mom, so I'm not emotionally hostage by the fact that you're crying, and so you need to just kind of wear yourself out, and then you're going to go to class. And we do that enough, and then I go scream in the bathroom for a few minutes, but it's okay. It's fine, you guys, I'm fine. But it gets less. The kids that are there every single day are eventually there 3 times a week, and are eventually there once a week. Until they're back 5 days a week, because this thing is a roller coaster. Like coming back from Christmas break, I was like, all right, here we go. We're coming back to school, you guys. You can't stay home. And then we wean it down again. But it's just having them face hard things, not letting them get out of it every time, because they have to build that equity of nothing terrible is coming. It really isn't. We're just going to go do math. It's fine. And then we also, how about the impulse control? That's a good time, right? The kids that didn't have to sit in a structured setting and now have to return to a structured setting, that is really hard. And again, coming back to how we build our social skills, that same executive management and self-control and self-discipline gets built in the same way. And we pulled some blocks out, and we didn't acknowledge it when we brought them back. We just came back because we were excited. And we don't get to have any shame about that, right? We're going to let that go. But it was just what we did. And so we had kids who missed the time in life where you learn to use the restroom by yourself on your pass, and then all of a sudden they're going to be tasked with, you're going to do this independent work. They're not ready, and so they look for any kind of distraction to get out of being uncomfortable. And that impulse control is difficult. So what do? There's a whole bunch of stuff. We talked yesterday about the difference between what's wrong with you versus what happened to you. Hearing people's stories from the last couple of years and kind of having some room to let them tell them is a really big part of unraveling this. Intentionally modeling behaviors for kids. We have to be aware that they're watching, and we have to be aware that they just don't get it. They don't know how to do it by themselves. And so we have to show them. And then creating the opportunities to safely practice independence, to safely get back some of those times. The outside resources, we're a big school. We have a lot of resources. We're really blessed with that. We also have a lot of kids. So while we do have the resources in-house, we're still stretched thin just by the sheer volume of students that we have. We wouldn't survive without outside resources and learning how to navigate them. I encourage you, if you do not have a partnership with AA or Al-Anon or Alateen or NA, to think about that. I guarantee you your congregation needs it. I guarantee you. I grew up in Alateen. I grew up in court-ordered Alateen. It was, every so often that it was just a stipulation of my parents maintaining custody was that I had to go and attend Alateen meetings. And so I can tell you firsthand that they are so powerful for kids because you already feel like a weirdo anyway. And then to have a parent that is not behaving like an adult is super weird. And so the opportunity to sit with others and be a part of that is so empowering for the kids. And those kids are gonna stop disrupting your classroom because they're gonna finally have an outlet. And they're finally gonna have a place to share it because we come back to the shame of those kids are all secret keeping too. They are. They're doing the best they can to make sure that nobody knows what's going on at home. I was the kid that couldn't tell you what was going on in my house, did not stop talking in class because that was my best way to not have to sit and think about stuff, right? I drove everybody crazy. I think I need to go back to my high school and tell them what I do for a living now because I think they would be like, what? Oh, you talk, okay. The AA and Al-Anon, though, the culture recovery is so amazing. And they are, at the heart, Christian-based. Celebrate Recovery is wonderful. Smart Recovery is wonderful. I always just kind of continue to return back to where I grew up just because I think the part of the family care is so huge. Your mental health professionals in your community are such a great resource, and don't be afraid to throw that out there. Interns are magic. Like marriage and family therapy interns, clinical practice interns, social work interns, they have to work for basically nothing. So take advantage of that, use them for that, bring them in, let them run small groups, talk about what you're seeing. I have 3 different professionals that come in throughout the school year to run groups on managing anxiety, managing depression, managing stress. Partly because sometimes I think the kids get really tired of me, and then also because I just don't have time. I run our grief groups just because I know those kids so well, and it's easier to keep that in-house. But there are a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of free out there. We started piloting a program this year. The website's called Close Gap. If you work with younger kids, we use it even with our high school kids, it takes the kids through checking in and identifying emotions, and then it gives them tools as far as what to do now, what to do with it. And what's really cool on the administrative side is it tracks that data for me. So every single one of my 8th graders takes this check-in no less than twice a week. And so I can tell you now, this far into the school year, who are the kids that are not sleeping, who are the kids that are consistently reporting things don't feel great at home, who are the kids that have yet to eat breakfast, right? And we can get at that in different ways. And it takes nothing out of me when they do this. My health teachers have the kids log in. It takes a couple of minutes. I get an email if they think somebody's in crisis. Most of the time they're really not. And then the kids are now learning to use these tools. And what's been really fun is I will get emails at like 1 or 2 in the morning of a kid using the program. I felt stressed. I got on. I used this technique. So take advantage of those things. There's a whole lot of not very expensive out there. Bright Course has a ton of materials as far as helping parents parent, navigating things at home. If anybody's familiar with Pam Stenzel is kind of housed in Bright Course. So I think that should maybe give you an idea. Great video series. You can go on, take a look at their website, see what's available. It's not on us to solve every problem for every person in front of us. It is totally good for us to outsource and to use these things. I'm writing some curriculum for Bright Course right now on trauma practices that I'm really excited about to just kind of get out there and train people on how to avoid secondary trauma and things like that, which we'll get to. And then remembering that it boils down to relationships. We talked yesterday about Mark 6, and Jesus sends the disciples away to nap, and the crowds are still following him, and nobody's eating, and it's all of this chaos. And it says he looked at them with compassion. And he sat with them with compassion, And then the disciples roll in and start freaking out about how are we going to eat and how are we going to feed them and what are we going to do. We don't have to solve it. Sometimes we just have to sit and understand what's going on, and then we can figure it out. And then what do we do with it? And this kind of comes back to what we talked about yesterday. I think we don't do a very good job in ministry. This is going to be my understatement of the week. We don't do a very good job in ministry of knowing what our bandwidth actually is, right? We believe we can say yes to everything. We want to help people. That's why we're here. That's why we're driven to do this. I think that those honest conversations in your team, though, of I need you to call me out when you see that I'm stretching myself too thin, and I need you to address that with me. That kind of accountability is really, really powerful because it takes away some of that guilt when we do have to say no. Other schools in town reach out to me a lot for help, especially if they have a tragedy that happened in their campus and they're not sure what to do with it. And I'm happy to help if I have the bandwidth. And if I don't, I have to be really honest about it, because me, burned out and not at my best and having a crisis happening at my own school is not going to serve well a school community that just lost a child. And so that has to go to somebody else in that moment. If I'm good, I'll go. And I feel like that's been a good understanding, and it hasn't harmed any relationships. Secondary responder trauma is such a real thing. When we went through 1 October, and as mental health professionals, we were hearing the stories and hearing the stories and hearing the stories and hearing the stories. And the firsthand, you do start to take on that stress. But then what comes along with it is that great feeling of guilt and shame and the knowledge of, but I didn't actually experience this, so I shouldn't get to feel bad. And so as we're working with families who are struggling, just being mindful of that. You know, I'm going to hear those stories all day long, and I need to figure out what I do with it, and I don't get to feel bad that I feel bad, because it is a lot. Compassion fatigue isn't really fatigue of feeling compassionate. It's that worn down, I am really surrounded by a lot of people who need a lot of things, and it is real. And we have to know how to step back from that and take care of ourselves. We talked a lot yesterday about realistic expectations. We're not going to fix all of these children, and we're not going to fix all of these families, and we weren't called to fix everybody either. God did not task us with that. And so I think it's easy in ministry to catch ourselves starting to go down that road of being everything for everybody and then feeling bad when we can't. I think we should ask for help. I think everybody should have a therapist. If you don't have one, I think you should get one. We need to offload this. I'm very, very transparent with everybody that I work with that I will stay in therapy for the rest of my life, because what am I supposed to do with all of this, right, if I can't work through it with somebody else? We have a thing that we do at school called Success Team that I think done well is incredible, but you have to be really careful about how you do it. Basically, we bring together some key players every few weeks, and we just talk about the kids that we're worried about. And it does a number of things. It gets the right people involved. If I have a 7th grade boy who refuses to turn in homework and is self-harming, and I know the situation at home is volatile, then it's great that my AD is in there to make the basketball coach aware to keep a closer eye on that kid. And it's great that the school nurse is in there to make sure to look out for any fresh wounds if he happens to come in there to get anything. And it's great that my dean is in there to know that if this kid gets sent out by a teacher for talking, he's not the one to go hard at. He doesn't need it. He doesn't need you to respond that way. And so it's really powerful to get us on the same place. But then it also has the benefit of, and I just got to share this stress. I am no longer solely responsible for the well-being of this child, because there are other professionals that I trust on this campus who've tagged in. And that gives me a lot of sustainability in my career. We have to be careful with it, though, because it could very easily turn into, we're going to get together and complain about the hard kid. And so you have to watch the spirit of that. It can get negative fast if you're not careful. And then you also have to make sure that you have just the very right people in that room that are going to respect the confidentiality of what you're talking about, that are going to be in the spirit of it, and are actually going to get dirty also with you and engage with the kids and figure things out. I'm big on permission slips. I think that, again, we just have to give ourselves permission to not have all the answers, because we don't, and we're not going to have all the solutions. And then to engage your prayer warriors as much as possible for these families. And I wasn't going to do this, but this was kind of the coolest thing that happened to me this morning. I went to this session about, will LCMS be gone in 2040? The answer is no, he said, just so you guys know. But he had us pray with someone next to us, and I loved that. And so I want to give a few minutes before we wind down and get you to dinner, just with someone around you, if you can pray for those families that are on your heart. You don't have to use names or whatever. But make a new friend. We'll take a couple of minutes to pray together, and then we'll bring it back together, okay? All right, we'll go ahead and bring that back together. Interrupting prayer time, I didn't quite know how to end that. Apparently I'm not ending that. It's good, I like it. All right. Nice. All right, we are in the homeward stretch here. So a few things that I love right now. I always like to share this, and this will be downloaded in the app as we go. These are a few of the things that I'm reading. Low Anthropology, if you haven't read it, is great if you're struggling with giving yourself grace or giving grace to other people. The What Happened to You, Dr. Perry spent a lot of years going into Oprah's schools and kind of helping those girls unravel what they had been through. And it's a really great book about how we talk about trauma. If you're feeling isolated, People Fuel is the place to go to figure out how to put your life team together. And then I love Hero on a Mission, the Book of Joy. They're adorable. The Archbishop Tutu and Dalai Lama are so cute together and such a great example of how we find joy in hard situations. And then also how we have relationships with people who are not like us, who don't believe what we believe, and how that can still be a positive, healthy thing. And again, Atlas of the Heart with Brene Brown does such a great job of just breaking everything down. I'm going to go to my closing slide, and then I'm going to go back to my questions slide. So if anybody wants to submit a question over that, they can. I'm happy to answer it. If you'd rather speak personally or small group, I'll hang out. Basically, I'm going to kind of close out with this last slide, open it for questions, let it get super awkward, right? And then we'll go to dinner. How about that? So I would love to stay in touch. Like I said, I hear from a lot of schools that kind of ask for help, and when I can engage, I do, and when I can't, I'm honest about it. But I love getting to know people and networking and finding different people, and it's been so fun to meet so many of you, and everybody that came yesterday and took the time to talk to me. It fills my heart. I love that. I have a mailing list that goes out whenever I'm focused enough to do that, so it's very sporadic. But if you'd like to be a part of that, send me an email and I can add you onto that subscription list. My website is in the app. I have a book. I have a dog. That's my comfort dog. She's on social media. She hates her job, so that's really fun to follow. She's the most reluctant comfort dog to ever comfort dog. Yeah, and then clearly I copied this slide from yesterday because I will not be back here again at 4 o'clock tomorrow. I will be dealing with something else in Vegas. So that is my main presentation. Here is your Okay, Let's Talk if you want to submit a question about anything yesterday or today or about the dog. If you want to quietly creep out and get a good spot in line at dinner, I totally respect that as well. I got to lunch early and managed to snag nachos, and I'm proud of that. So, let's see. Second. Oh, we do have some responses. We do have some questions. Will I repeat? It's so fun because they come in slow time, and I have to. All right. Will I repeat the stages of friendship? For sure. And there's really no scientific backing to this. I didn't get this from anywhere. This is my observation. In elementary school, they're very driven by their friends with whoever their parents are friends with. As we get into 6th and 7th grade, we start to get a little more independent, but it's still very much by circumstance. We sit by each other, we're on the same team. 8th and 9th grade, we start to have common interest friendships. I like robotics, you like robotics, things like that. Moving past 9th grade, we start to see the character development friendships. We have similar integrity, we have similar beliefs, we function in a similar way, and we have similar goals. And so that's how those things move through. Resources for parents experiencing trauma. That one kind of cut off. The Conversations with Trauma book, I think, is a really neat way to engage someone in talking about trauma without pointing out the fact that you believe that they have a lot of unresolved trauma. And so that's a book that I've kind of passed out to different people because you do recognize yourself in it, and so it's a good segue. What percentage of students have ADHD, and how are they dealing with life now the same as the others? I don't know what percent. I think that what we've kind of been through has exacerbated some ADHD symptoms. I think we have a lot of kids who are misdiagnosed right now. We've had a huge explosion of ADHD diagnosis, and I am not entirely convinced that that's what's happening medically. I think we have a lot of kids who don't know how to settle down and how to focus, and there is a difference between that and can't. If you are having parents that are coming in and they want you to weigh in on the medication debate, do you get that all the time? Like, should I medicate my kid? You know, I can tell you firsthand, when you are genuinely ADHD and you get that correct diagnosis and correct medication, it is magic. It is the first time that you feel like maybe I'm not like losing my mind. You know, I spent years being told by doctors that I had anxiety. And I'm like, but I really don't. I'm really not worried about anything. I probably should be more worried about things than what I am. And so they would prescribe anxiety medication, and then I would just like fall asleep and then wake up and still not know what was wrong. And so I finally went to a psychiatrist and I wrote out what I think when I try to complete a task. And I just said to her, you know, I could tell you exactly anything to get a diagnosis and get a medication. I know exactly what to say to you for every prescription that's on the market, and I don't want to do that. Here's my thought process. What's going on? And she was like, you have 3 college degrees. It's like, yeah, I made it, I guess, but very, very much. And so what I was experiencing was I was restless because I notice everything. And because I notice everything, I want to think about everything. And because there's so much to think about, it means I am never doing the right thing in the moment, is how I feel. And that's how your ADHD kids feel, by the way. They feel like they're never doing the right thing, no matter what they're doing, because there's so many other things to think about. And so that medication turned that off for me. If I did not have ADHD and they had prescribed that to me, it would have pushed me right into a panic attack. So parents can know that. Not a question, but I feel a lot of aggression came from the division caused by the vaccine. Yes. Many relationships were ended and parents had to fight just for their choice. Yeah. I'm interested when we start to enter into that healing phase of, you know, it's far enough behind us. And I feel like we're getting there. I feel like we're getting to a place where we can have a little bit more dialogue, or maybe we eventually get to a place where we just don't talk about it anymore. How would you start to share authentically with families to start the conversation about the struggles and such to connect and to build relationships? Sorry, it was an ADHD ramble. No, I followed that. You're my language. How to authentically start to share authentically to start the conversation about the struggles to connect and build relationships. I have had conversations before. You know, we have kids for 7 years, and so then when you have a family that has 4 children over 7 years, like you're in it for a lifetime. Like that's my career basically, and so I have to figure out how to have that relationship. I think it's very authentic just to start with, I really want to partner with you and I don't feel like we're on the same team right now. And then you can go from there. It doesn't have to be we're not connecting or there's a rub or there's whatever. I desire to partner with you and I don't know how to get there. So, okay, I think those are the things that were sent. So on that, I will hang out if we want to talk. I'd love to talk. Otherwise, there's ice cream. No, nay, Snickers.